Good morning. I will call the meeting of the Baldwin County Airport Authority to order. And I'm going to ask that we make a slight revision in the order on the minutes. I need to leave here earlier today than normal, so if we can move the closed session up to right after the approval of the minutes and the financials. If there's no issue with that, then we'll do that. Our new board member is not here, or not here yet. Dan Nolan is the new member of the Airport Authority, and welcome him. The first item of business will be the approval of minutes from the August 15th, 2018 meeting. You received a copy of those. Anybody note any errors or omissions? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item will be the approval of the financial statements. You received a copy of those. Are there any questions on those, or is there a motion to approve of the financials?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Did we have the application?
No, I
Oh, you
wasn't thinking, I skipped over it.
That's okay.
I was in such a hurry.
I know, well, you must be going to the district.
Next item is closed session to discuss real estate and litigation. Is there a motion for that purpose?
I make a motion for that purpose.
Have a motion to enter executive session, closed session for real estate litigation purposes. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Hopefully, we will not be long. All right, I'll have to report that we have adjourned executive session with no action taken. Is there a motion to re-enter regular session?
So moved.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With that, I need to be excused for another meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Chair, Mr. Aston, for the rest of the business. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
You too, be safe.
Thank you, Board.
All right, we have the airport director's report.
All right. So we had a couple of good events in the past 30 days or so. We had our STEM event that is, we provide the facility, but the event is actually a part of Baldwin County Department of Education. And I'd estimate we probably had 400 high school students. Does that sound about right? Something on that order?
Yes.
That were there. Chairman Carmichael was able to come by for a time. We had lots of participation by first responders, military personnel, several aircraft on the line for the students to actually see and touch. And just overall a very positive thing for the airport and for the school system. And when we get down a little lower, you're going to see another, actually I think it's the next, well, it was listed as 9 on the original agenda. The Department of Education wants to have a career day in energy, and they want to use our facility for that as well. So it'll be very similar to the format that we had for STEM, I'm sure. And so I would encourage y'all to consider that in a positive way when you get to that point on the agenda. The other thing that was positive for the airport, we had Robert came out with Keep Halden Beautiful. We had a volunteer day on a Saturday. Did some good cleanup around the airport. It looks really nice around there. We appreciate that. We appreciate him for spearheading that and the people who participated in that. So the last thing I'd like to go over is there was an article in the paper last week concerning bonds and who's responsible for bonds and the whole bond issue. Is primarily focused on the IBA. But the IBA and the Airport Authority were both mentioned in the article, and I just want to make sure that y'all as board members understand the contracts that we have signed and the legalities that go along with those, so that if you're approached in public and people say, well, why aren't you making your bond payment? You've got accurate, factual, contractual data to back you up on providing those answers. This bond that I'm talking about is the $3.6 million bond that was used to initially to widen the taxiway and lengthen the runway. It was halted midway through, about 90% through actually, due to the lawsuits and the failed environmental assessment. But the bills have still got to be paid. The bond payment is still very real. It's still there. And even I didn't fully understand all of the legalities of how bonds were issued when I first came into this job. And on the surface, it looks like it's our bond, we owe the payments, and when we don't make the payments, there's concern and issues with that. Well, this is the bond book. This is the actual document by which bonds are issued. And the reason it's so thick is because bonds are not a simplistic thing. Public bonds are highly regulated. They're legal documents. They're legal commitments of public governments and so forth. And boards, authorities exist in order to make bonds and the financing of government possible. And the relationship between your authorities, and I'm going to stay focused on the Airport Authority in this case, the funding mechanisms that exist for the airport are tightly linked with the funding mechanisms and the taxation of the county. And there have to be agreements made between our board, the Paulding County Airport Authority, and the Board of Commissioners in order for us to enter into the commitment of selling bonds and using those public monies for the furtherance of the airport. And the way it is supposed to work is there's a cooperative agreement between your authorities and your boards, the Board of Commissioners in this case, and the Paulding County Airport Authority, where they are in lockstep on whatever the project is and how we're going to pay for it. And those agreements have to be formalized and presented in Superior Court and approved by judges and lawyers and bond salesmen and all of the things that go into that. And that's why this document is so thick. But when you take out of context certain things, it may play well in a political arena, but it may not be factually correct. So let me give you a couple of very specific examples. If you go into the filing that was filed in Superior Court prior to the selling of the bonds, this is what was presented to the judge. And I'm going to read paragraph 10 out of that court filing. The county and the authority will enter into an intergovernmental contract dated as of October 1, 2013, parentheses, the contract, pursuant to which the authority will agree to issue the Series 2013 bond to pay the cost of acquiring, constructing, extending, and improving the project, and the county, in consideration of the authorities doing so, is obligated to make payments to the authority in amounts sufficient to pay the debt service on the 2013 bond, the contract payments, and to levy an ad valorem property tax if necessary, unlimited as to rate or amount, on the assessed value of all property in the county subject to such tax, in order to pay the contract payments. The county covets and agrees that in order to make funds available for such purpose, it will, in its general revenue, appropriation, and budgetary measures, whereby its tax funds or revenues and the allocation thereof are controlled or provided for, include sums sufficient to satisfy any such contract payments that may be required to be made, whether or not any other sums are included in such measure, until all payments so required to be made shall have been made in full. In other words, the county coveted in an intergovernmental agreement to make the bond payments. And that's That's contract law. And if you're curious about whether or not such an intergovernmental agreement was ever established, here it is. It's a signed intergovernmental agreement. And if you go back to the signature page, the seal of Paulding County on the signature page with the clerk and the county commissioner at the time's signature. And on the signature page before that, it was the seal of our board and our signatures. So this is an intergovernmental contract. It carries the weight of contract law. It is defendable in court. Now, we all understand that we had a gentleman's agreement between these boards that we would make these bond payments. And in fact, we entered into a contract with Silver Comet whereby those funds would be provided with the intent that those funds would be transferred to the county to make the bond payments and take the burden off of the citizens. When the two boards fell apart in working together and were no longer acting in lockstep with each other, the only thing that remained was the contracts. All of the gentlemen's agreements and the handshakes and the promises were superseded by the only thing that will be defendable in court, and that's these documents. Why is Paulding County Board of Commissioners making the bond payments today? It's not because they want to, it's because they have to. It's because they coveted and contracted to do so. And so, why are we not making the bond payments? Well, the real answer is we were never obligated to. This set of documents relieves us from any responsibility for having ever made those bond payments. And the fact that we were initially making those bond payments was an agreement to help the county. It was an agreement between the Board of Commissioners and the Airport Authority. So I just want to make sure that y'all have the facts and the factual data and know where to get the factual data when these issues come up, and make sure that we all understand that there is a difference between things that are said and documents that are recorded. And we, as an authority, have an obligation, in my opinion, to stick to the facts, and that's what I've always done. You know that I've always gone back to the root source of all of these controversies, and I'm always quoting the contracts, the lawsuits, the charges, the claims, the signed documents, because you can't argue with the facts. We can have our opinions. We can all have our own individual opinions, but we are compelled to share the same set of facts. And these recorded documents are the facts. So if anybody has any facts that are contradictory to what I just read, I'd like to know it. I've not found it, haven't seen it. But the real answer is that's the contract that we are bound to. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Well, as for myself, just like I've always been, it's still sad that I always thought about home taxpayers, regardless of whether this group or that group can come together and make things work. I'm worried about the taxpayers.
When government fails to operate efficiently, when government starts suing itself instead of working together, it is the taxpayer who suffers. I agree.
It's sad.
It is. It's very sad. But it's my job as your CEO to make sure that we have the correct facts out there so that people make the correct assessments about who is responsible for what. And there have been some things said, some things reported that simply are not true. And that's why I always want to go back to the founding documents and make sure we understand what we have contractually signed up for. Thank you.
Item 7, motion to approve the aviation scholarship application. You want to say anything about that, Terry?
This is a document that we have jointly put together with the school system, so we consider it draft right now. We are ready. Okay, so we do have a couple of typos, I take it, that have come in?
Yes.
Okay. So we would consider this to be the 99% document. And if there's anything in the form of the document that y'all want to see us change, we'd like to do that so that we can go ahead and get this finalized and adopted so that we can get it into the school well ahead of their deadlines. The intent would be to issue a $1,000 scholarship. And remember, as we've been saying, this doesn't come out of our funding. This comes out of private donations that are made. I think our scholarship fund right now is somewhere between $500 and $700. But between now and the spring, we'll be calling each of y'all and all of our friends, make sure we've got $1,000 there. And we are going to select a student that shows promise in aviation to present this $1,000 scholarship to for the furtherance of aviation in Paulding County. So any questions about the form, other than Stacy's typos?
Were my typos correct?
If they were, yeah.
Do I hear a motion to approve the aviation scholarship application?
I make a motion to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
Can you amend that with changes?
I'm sorry. Make a motion to approve with changes.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
Thank you all
carries.
very much. This is big.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Item 8, motion to approve sale of surplus steel to Taylor Junkyard for 4 cents per pound on site.
Okay, so let me talk about this a little bit. Everybody is aware of the accident that occurred when the hangar was first being constructed, the big corporate hangar, and some of the steel that was involved in that accident could not be reused. Quite a bit of it, actually, could not be reused. And so from a liability standpoint and an engineering standpoint, those structural members that were twisted, bent, damaged in any way as the building fell, they were replaced. So you buy these hangars as a kit, so every beam, every piece has a part number, and the engineers were able to go through and say, this one's good, this one's not, and they ordered replacement pieces, and that's what finished the construction of the building. The issue then is that we're left with all of this scrap surplus iron that cannot be used in a building for liability and structural reasons. And you know that it's been setting up on what I call Construction Hill, the big hill right there at the water tank as you come into the property. And there's quite a bit of that, and I've gone through it and tried to think of any positive use that we might have for that. But the bottom line is we need to just scrap it. It's sitting there rusting away. And we have an offer from Taylor Junkyard that they will bring the truck, they'll bring the crane, they'll bring the manpower, and they will remove this steel from our property and still give us 4 cents a pound for the scrap iron. Today's scrap price is something like 8 cents a pound. So we're giving them half of the credit for the steel, estimated somewhere around $2,000 to $3,000 for their effort and expense to come and get the steel, cut it up, and haul it off. So this is the only viable option that I'm aware of. I think it's a reasonable thing for the airport. It will generate a little bit of income for us, but more importantly, it clears all of this out. And some of this steel is going to be on the back side of the wildlife fence when we get that finished, with no gate access to get to that area where this is. And so we really need to do it now because we don't want to cut the fence to have to go through a year from now or whatever to get rid of it. So I would encourage y'all to go ahead and let's say this is a reasonable amount to receive for that surplus steel and to go ahead and approve this sale.
Make a motion to approve the sale of the surplus steel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 9, special use permit for Paulding County Department of Education, Careers and Energy Day.
And so again, I mentioned this earlier, this is another Department of Education event. Their use of the property We have been highly supportive of all educational uses of the property in the past. This one is no different. They are great partners. You know, they take great care of the property when they come in. Ms. Perry, who runs experiential learning, among other things, is the primary person that we would be working with in the Department of Education. And so I would encourage y'all to, of course, happily approve this request.
So notice the application stated 450 people in attendance. Are they going to be inside, outside?
Both.
Okay.
Yep.
Do I hear a motion for the special use permit for Paulding County Department of Education Careers and Energy Tech?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Any further comments and or questions? If not, I entertain a motion for adjournment of the meeting.
Make motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.